In Atlantis, things were so different than they are now. So I thought back, okay, what did my experience look like? Well, I'm standing on a hill and I'm looking over this community. Now, if I was standing on a hill now and looking at a community of dwellings where people live, I'd be looking at houses, the rooftops of houses, but not in Atlantis. I was looking at a forest. It looked just like a forest. And that's because in that time in Atlantis, we lived in trees. And I don't mean like squirrels or monkeys. I mean that we lived in trees that made dwellings for us. Hello, hello, hello. It's Carol Ann Chapman. This time that I'm talking about, the agreement of nature time in Atlantis, was before there were human beings. The time of Atlantis, that Atlantis existed, was actually a very, very long time. So that Atlantis was different depending on what period of time you have memories from. The other thing that it was before was that it was a time before we used language. So when we communicated with nature, we communicated with our thoughts. And because we didn't have words yet, and I will talk about this in future videos, we talked more in image bundles. Now, say we want to make a home in a tree, and people like to make tree houses. So what does it take to make a tree house? Usually it means that you find a good tree for it, but you also have to use some lumber that you bang into this tree to make a floor, to make a ladder to get up there, to make a roof. Well, that lumber comes from a dead tree. Somebody had to cut a tree down and then cut the lumber out of the tree. Well, in Atlantis, we didn't do that. In Atlantis, we communicated with the tree, and it was a friendly exchange. We didn't say the way we would do now, I want a tree house, so this is what I'm going to do. And that means I go to the lumber yard, and those are cut down trees, and then I make my tree house. In Atlantis, we would ask the tree. We would say, but again, not with words, we might send a image that shows us getting rained on because we're living in the tree. And so then we send an image about, wouldn't it be nice if there was a whole bunch of leaves over us? And the tree would grow extra limbs and leaves. So we had these sort of chambers of where people would live. And because we asked, and because nature was, I mean, in many ways, nature was happy that we asked. It's just like nowadays, I don't know if you have some plants in the house or outside. Don't you feel like your plants care that you've noticed them and that I mean, I talk to my plants, I think that they respond, and they certainly responded in Atlantis. Did you see Lord of the Rings? Because the trees in Lord of the Rings have personalities, which is much more of the way it was in Atlantis with the trees at that time. So again, it's not that we said, this is what I want. Unless you do it, I'm going to cut you down and form you into something else. We asked, and the trees, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And of course, we'd have to be patient because things in the natural world don't just happen like that. And in fact, even if we cut a tree down, we just recently bought a house that was built. It took years, it took 3 years before it was all finished. So yeah, it still takes quite a bit of time. So the other thing about this time was that we didn't only communicate that way with trees. The best way I can explain it is my own memories of that time. And it was as if I was an oversoul and that I could be in a number of creatures at the same time. And I could even work with the creature so that it could modify itself in the same way as with a tree. And I had been in a woman with a child, that these were the ones that were killed by the boulder. I'd also been a woman scientist, and I'd been the pixie faced frog being. Each of them, I communicated with their essence, with their inner self, to do whatever I would ask them to do. And it was a very satisfying experience to be involved with these creatures on Earth because I had been a light being from another star system. And I believe we are all light beings, eternal light beings, and that our religious writings from whatever culture we're in are originally attempting to explain this about who we really are. So I've been just so thrilled that you're here with me today. I really, really feel so warm and cared for. Thanks so much. And I'll see you next time. Toodaloo. Bye bye.